wanted to, if we could, I wanted to finish up with a little bit of the swimming there.
Yeah.
And I was reading, you know, about that 200 butterfly national championship, and you know, Jim really talked about how you found your confidence that morning with a 144, and he had a quote where he said, "I never even thought about him not winning this race," even though your quotes were, you know, you were obviously pretty surprised. And you talked about how that race felt different, maybe than any 200 butterfly that you had ever done to that point, that you fatigued differently, and that you said, you know, I always die in the last 50, and today I felt different. You know, it seemed like that was a really, really special execution and result for you.
Yeah, that whole day, that experience was just different than any race I've had. So that morning, it was again like I was in the heat. Actually, I don't even really know where I was in prelims, because I know my time going into it wasn't that great comparatively. So it didn't really matter what I did in the morning. And I ended up like just swimming it again. And I think I was like 145 or something, or 144 high in the morning. And that, like, in itself, I was like, whoa, that was fast. And that was fast without me even like thinking anything of it. And then Nick swam after me, Nick Albiero swam after me. And I mean, I just barely beat him going into it. And so I was seated first. And so I got to pick the song and everything for our walkout, and him and I were both already planning on going to Louisville at that point. So we kind of like coordinated what we were going to wear on the walkout. And so it was like just kind of like having, because I had never gotten to do something like that at that level. So I was just having fun with it all day. I usually like go back to the hotel and I'm like super serious in between my events. My mom usually is like always out of the hotel room, like let me do my thing. But like all day, I was just having fun. Like I was riding a completely different high of like swimming fast. And so it was just totally different. And then one thing I remember, and I didn't tell Jim this until after the race, Nick was talking to me and he was like, well, one of us has to win, right? And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, no, I have to win. And yeah, so like that race itself.
Well, hang on. I have a question before we get to the race, because we humans, we don't know anything about what you're talking about getting to pick the song. So how does that go? Like, did you immediately know what song you wanted to play? And I'm curious, like, how do you submit the song that you want to play? Do you do it that night? Do you have to tell them in the morning or the afternoon so they have it ready? How's that work? Tell us humans how that happens.
So at a national meet like that, they usually also have like a little bit of a bio on the swimmer to like read off as they're reading off the names while you're standing behind the blocks. And so I was filling out my sheet of like awards I had gotten in the past or whatever, just like some highlights for them to read off. And there was like, and if you want to add anything else. And Jim and I, like, because I was saying, like, I was just having fun with this whole day. We wrote down, and his mom says he's a really good boy. And so they read that over the speaker, and I remember like clapping and like pointing up to my mom. It's like in the race video too. So like just having a ton of fun. And so with the song, it's usually, it depends on the meet. Either they'll just have all the songs ready to go, or they'll let the swimmers pick. Sometimes just because it saves time and they don't know what explicit song the swimmer wants to pick, and so they got to go through all that stuff too and make sure it's usable. But so I always have like a couple songs that like I would want to listen to, but like I said, Nick and I were talking about it, and there's this song called, and like I said, I was going to Louisville at the time, there's a song called You Don't Want These Cards. And so it was just super fun to walk out to that. Like the Louisville coaches, a couple of Louisville coaches and swimmers were there. So like they were going crazy when the song came on. And so, yeah, it was like super fun to pick that and have that play, walking out and that experience.
All right, now we can talk about the race. Now tell me about it.
Yeah. So, that whole season, or like that partial season, I guess, because I had a weird time. Jim and I were working together on like just a race strategy for the tuner fly. I'm the kind of person that loves to break up every little part of my race so I know exactly what I'm going to do. And that helps me with like my confidence a little bit, and not, it just, as long as I do it, I'm okay with it. Like I had a couple swims previously where I was like, so I went a 144 in the race and there were like a couple like just tune-up races that I would go like 155 or something like that, like not good, but they were like, I was just working on specific parts of the race like all up until this point. So I'd worked on every part of the race that I'd wanted to up until this point. And so just before the race, Jim and I were talking about that, and it was one of the main things was Nick's going to be ahead of me at the 100. That's how he swims it. That's how he always has swum it. And I have never swum it where I am aggressive on the first 100 of that race. I always try to stay relaxed. And so I remember the first 50 happens. It's the first 50 of a 200. And then at the 100 mark, he was, I think, like a half a body length ahead of me. And I remember touching and just going, yep, this is exactly what we talked about. Everything's going fine. And then going into the next turn, so at the 125 mark, he had started to pull away a little bit. And at that point, I don't know if I was really thinking like I'm still in an okay spot or like I have to go, but it just kind of naturally happened. Like I just kind of started to at least like just put a little bit more into each stroke. My stroke counts were still the same throughout the whole race. And then on the last wall, him and I were again within like 0.1 of each other. And then going into that last 50, I usually start in the 200 fly, like start swimming vertically on that last 50. And that just didn't happen. And I remember like going into the last turn feeling like, wait a minute, I am not as tired as I've ever been. Like it was a totally new feeling that I had, and I know it was because of how I was prepping for the race. Like I was super confident, having fun. Pushing off that wall, I had my kick counts that I wanted to do, which was 7 off of that last wall, and he tried to like almost 15, and where he had slowed down just a little bit, I took an extra stroke and was able to get past him. And then I like touched, looked up at the wall or at the board, and then kind of like looked back and didn't realize it, and then like looked back again and just went insane. I've always wanted to like celebrate like that in the water, so I just went crazy. And like he had gotten second, so like we like hugged in the water, and I remember like I was also so tired that like I like almost drowned him, like having my arms around him. It was super, super fun. And like having the camera come over and like all that stuff, I've never experienced before. It was so much fun. But like in the race itself, everything was calculated. I knew exactly what I was doing, so it wasn't emotional until after the race, which doesn't happen a lot in my swimming, so that was pretty cool too.
Had you never kind of expressed your emotions in the water like that before?
No, the one time before was getting my trials cut, because it was like my last opportunity to get it, and I had made it by 0.01. So like that was pretty crazy and another experience. But even this was just another level of, it was different. Because like even in that race, I think I got like 3rd or something. So like it was more of the time that mattered. But this was like I went a fast time. and I won, and I went a faster time than everybody at the West Juniors. So like I had the fastest time at that point. So it was totally crazy.
And that time is still like, excuse me, that time is still top 40 all time in that age group, and you know, still a really significant time. One thing I wanted to ask you, just in terms of the order of the events, where did that event fall in place? I saw you went 47.6 in the 100 and 136 in the 200, which were both, I think, kind of high school career lifetime best. Where did the 200 fall in the meet order for you?
So 200 flies on the last day.
Okay.
Which is,
so your confidence is already pretty up by this point, obviously.
It was up for sure, but that event always worries me, being on the last day. You're already super tired. And the one thing I had going for me was and what was different is we had relays there, which I had never done at a national level meet before. So I had a full load as far as my events were concerned. And so that was completely different to me too. And that was another thing. So actually, warming up in the evening, I felt like garbage for that race. And one thing Jim, I think, will still say to this day is, like, if I tell him I'm feeling like crap during warm up, he knows I'm going to have a good swim. For whatever reason, that seems to be the case. Like, I know how to warm up a little bit differently if I'm not feeling great, and whether that warm up that I do, if I'm not feeling great, is better than what I would have done, I don't know. But also, I was originally signed up for the 200 back as well, but we scratched that for that reason. Like, it doesn't make sense to tire myself out a little bit more, especially on the 200 back on your legs. It's just tough. So it was last, but I was used to it being last, so I kind of knew sort of how to go about it.
Sure. So I want to back up a little bit here. So obviously you talked about, you already were committed to Louisville at this point. And as I've talked about with a number of swimmers, the recruiting timelines are just so different now than, the guys that I talked to who swam 30, 40, 50 years ago that went to their high school state meet their senior year and then tried to figure out where they were going to go to college. Now you got guys that are making their commitments before they ever touch the water their junior year, in some cases. So tell me about your original recruiting process and how you arrived at Louisville.
Yeah, so one thing for me was, my goal growing up was to get a full ride. Like, once swimming started to become the thing that I love to do, I wanted to get a full ride. And at the time when I was younger, it didn't really matter where so much. I just thought it'd be I wanted to swim in college. I think it'd be super cool to have it paid for. But I also am and was very realistic, and I knew that swimming was, unless you're where I was when I won juniors, but obviously being recruited wasn't there yet. Unless you're at that point, you're not getting a full swimming scholarship. It just doesn't happen. There isn't enough money. And I knew that. And so academics were a huge part of me trying to achieve that goal. And so starting out, looking at schools, I started looking at schools where I knew I could get a solid amount of academic money, all while knowing that I wanted to go into engineering. But the money at the time was a little bit more important for me. So I was looking at 3 SEC schools, Arizona and Louisville, just because I knew the kind of academic money I could get. And I mean, as most people know, there's a reason those schools give more academic money than any Big Ten school for that matter, or a lot of other schools. But that was my goal, and I was set on achieving that goal. So my recruiting, or at least my trips, got started a little bit later than most people, because you're not allowed, or at least at the time we weren't allowed to go on trips until you'd started school. And in Michigan, we start school a little bit later than most places. So my first trip was to Arizona, and I remember like talking to people, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is like my third or something. Like, where else have you gone?" I was like, "This is my first one, like experiencing all that." And like that was a super fun trip. Loved it there. Loved the town, everything. But I was told like go on your other trips, like see your options. You have time. Like it doesn't matter what they tell you as far as you not having time. Like go on your other trips and experience everything you can. So then next weekend I had my trip to Louisville. And really, the only reason I was looking at Louisville in the first place was because like every school I was looking at, I had some sort of connection to. Arizona, Kyle Moss was recruited heavily by them. So I just like got to know the coaches through that a little bit. Alabama, obviously Jim, and Kyle goes there now. Auburn, that Camden was heavily favoring Auburn, that in Georgia where it was like 2 top picks. So I got to talk to them, like being with him a lot. And then LSU, just because I knew I was a lock as far as money was concerned. And I knew the coach at the time, the recruiting coach was a coach from Michigan. So I knew him well. But then Louisville, I was looking at, that's where Sam Hoekstra went. And he was one of my high school coaches. So he was like, will you look at them? And I was like, all right, sure. So he got all that set up for like my unofficial and stuff. And then I decided to take an official visit there. And my visit was actually the game that Louisville beat Florida State when they were ranked number 2. And that game was wild. That whole weekend was super fun.
Are you saying Lamar Jackson helped deliver you to Louisville?
It was definitely an experience for sure. But I knew like not to just put it on like one football game, and especially if you like look at their football now. But no, like I mean, I liked or at least thought I liked the small college town atmosphere. And like through that whole trip, I knew like where my money was, and it wasn't quite at a full ride. So I was like, yeah, I want to take all the rest of my visits. And then so the following week, I was supposed to go to Auburn, and that Wednesday, on Thursday, that next Thursday, I was supposed to get on the plane to go to Auburn. That Wednesday, I was texting with Louisville's coach, and he was like, hey, we really want you, like, what's holding you back? And I told him, like, I was honest. I was like, here's the thing, my life goal is to get a full ride to college. I'm going to weigh my options. I really liked it there, but I just want to see what I can do. Because at that point, it was like my ACT money was the majority of the money I was getting. He was like, okay, well, this is what we can do. Apparently he was in some like banquet meeting with Kelsey, Dahlia at the time. And he was like, so I'm really busy, but here's what we can do. We'll give you the full ride under like the promise that you'll like keep trying to take the ACT to like get the next level of money. So then that would cover what we're going to cover now. And as long as you do that, we'll give you the full ride. But you have a day to decide. So I was given 24 hours to make a decision that would affect quite a bit of my life. And at 18 years old, I chose money and committed, and that's where I was really excited about it. I thought that was like totally what I wanted, and even throughout that like whole year, I fully embraced going there and wanting to like learn more about it. But I think I remember people asking me, it's like, so why'd you go? Like, why Louisville? Why this? Because like most people knew like how smart I was in school, and like that I wanted to be an engineer, and they're like, so why Louisville? And I remember the only thing I could ever think to tell them was because I got a full ride. That's where I wanted to go. So that definitely played a role in the future, but wasn't the biggest part. But definitely I mean, at the time, was super excited about that, and taking that then into juniors where pressure was off. Like I was on a high going through my senior year. Like water polo went really well that season. I was training super well. I just committed, like all these things like were going super well. So then going into juniors, like you had mentioned, my confidence was through the roof at that point.
So obviously you were in Louisville for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So you arrived at a place fairly quickly that you wanted to be someplace different. Tell me about that year and how you arrived at that.
So that now gets into the whole mental health thing. So at least the rest of my senior year then started to not go the way I would have thought it would have, based on how that juniors went. And at the time, and really up until coming to Michigan, didn't know why this was the case. But at the time, I was like super focused on, I had done so much as far as working out outside of the pool, getting my diet to a place that was going to benefit my swimming, doing things for my mental health to like make me swim faster. But I wanted more. That's like just the kind of person I am. That's how I've always been with swimming and school and everything. And so I was like determined to figure out what I needed to do next to get more. And I, like I had mentioned, had surgery to help my kidneys when I was younger. And so, because my kidneys can't like process everything correctly, I had a lot of people concerned like, oh, well, if you're doing this much working out, because at the time, like I'd said, I was doing like swimming 5 mornings a week, playing water polo, lifting, like all this stuff. And they're like, you're making sure you're like getting enough food and enough protein to like sustain what you're doing. And at the time I was like, yeah, but I didn't really know. So I like started to kind of like track it just to see. And at the time it was just to see, am I even getting close to enough? And I was, for the most part, and clearly it was working because training was going well. But then, like I said, I'm like the kind of person that likes to like calculate and nitpick things. I started to do that more and more with this tracking of what I was eating, and to the point where I was eating nowhere near enough to sustain my training. And I didn't know it at the time. Throughout that senior year of high school, training started to go a little bit rough, but I was just kind of putting it on, I'd done so much. This is kind of like my body like saying it needs a little bit of a break, just because I was going nonstop for so long, but I obviously wasn't going to take a break. And then into high school state, like 500 obviously went well. I won the 500 and went a best time. My tuner free, I didn't go best time. And again, was like, okay, maybe it's just high school training. Maybe it's this, like trying to find other reasons. I mean, I was still going out on a high. Like I had 2 more state titles, but I was not satisfied with the meet. And then to sectionals after that, didn't go that great, but as a team, MLA was doing fantastic, so I had nothing really to be upset about. Our relays were doing really well. It was the first time MLA like won a sectional meet, like, so that was all super cool. And then we get to the summer, before I went to Louisville, and that's when things started to really, really go bad. I was restricting carbohydrates beyond control, and it was bad. And Jim didn't know at the time because I didn't know what was going on, but I was freezing in the water. I couldn't make it through workouts. Had no idea why. Like I couldn't figure out what was going on. That whole summer, then we get to that juniors, and that meet, I was putting so much pressure on myself because I was like, well, I'm on a full ride. I gotta show them that I'm worth this money. And then the tuner fly, which in the summer is the first event, I didn't even make it back to finals, and I was seeded first. So that was just absolutely crushing. But the rest of my teammates were having a great meet. I was the oldest one. It was my job to be there for everyone else, be this mentor. And so like that's what I put my energy into for the meet. And everyone was like on board with like, and I was talking with the Louisville coaches, and everyone was on board with that being what my role was at that meet. Like, we'll get you to campus, we'll figure things out, get you training well again. Well, I get to campus, and of course now I don't have farther away from my support group at home, and I'm left to my own devices, and things only got worse. Training was now different, harder, much more volume. School was super hard, and I was still restricting like crazy, to the point where at my lowest, from where I am now, I was 35 pounds less. I was sitting at under 3% body fat. All like just completely unsustainable. I was quite literally like fading away each day. But couldn't quite figure out why, because in my mind I was doing the things that were supposed to help my swimming. Like, I was losing weight, I was cutting this, I was doing the things that were supposed to make me look better and swim faster. And so that I just kept doing it. And then our meets started to roll around, and now I'm swimming times at meets that, like, I was swimming faster my freshman year of high school than I was at some of these dual meets, which was embarrassing. I don't think I made it through a single dual meet without crying. Obviously, my emotions and my hormones were completely out of whack because of all the restricting I was doing. But still, like, just didn't know why. I thought at that time now we were blaming it on increased workload. My legs were dead. Like, it'll come around, come taper. Like, we'll figure it out. And it just never did throughout the year. And on top of all that, I didn't really connect with the team the way I thought I was going to. The class that recruited me, it was a class of 16 seniors. So they made up the majority of the team. And most places in recruiting, they say like they want you to put you with the freshmen and sophomores because that's who you're going to be with when you're in college. But that wasn't the case there. And I don't fault this. The Louisville coaches were like, nope, it's the seniors team. It's their legacy. It's what they want to show the world, the recruits, at this is what this team is about. And that's just a different way of doing things. But at the time, I connected a ton with that group of seniors, and because it was half the team, when I got there and they were gone, just didn't really have the same connections with everybody. On top of that, our dorm situation there was not normal dorms, where it's like 2 beds next to each other in a tiny little room. We had apartment-style dorms. So me and my roommate had a full kitchen, common area, our own separate bedrooms in our dorm room. So, like, I locked myself away pretty much every night, didn't go out and do things. So I didn't have anybody to talk to. Like, I wasn't not friends with anybody, but I didn't, like, at practice we were fine. I didn't not like anybody. I just wasn't friends with them outside of the pool. And now 5.5 hours isn't that long, but it was far enough that I couldn't go home. And I was just falling deeper and deeper into this hole, still not understanding what was going on. Being told I should probably try to eat more. My body can take it. I need to like get through these practices, but I was like, it's not that simple. Like, I feel like what I'm doing is right. And then finally started to like meet with psychologists, and we started to figure out like what the problem was, but still, and this will, now you can decide how much of this you want to cut up, but they could not diagnose me with the fact that I had an eating disorder. To them, it was, it's disordered eating, like you've been restricting, but you still kind of know what you want to do. So it's not really an eating disorder. And I'll never ever forget the meeting I had with the coaches one time, and he told me he's like, I mean, why can't you gain weight? Like, just eat a damn cheeseburger. Like, you can do it. Like, just go to McDonald's right now. Like, I'll pay for it. Go eat a cheeseburger. And like, I remember sitting there just like, I had no words because like there was nothing I could say at the time to make it anything better. It was like, that's just not gonna help. And at that point, I had made the decision that I needed, with the help of my parents and coaches, that I needed to get out of there. It was not a good environment for me. And I needed to go somewhere, and I needed to get support. But all that with the weight of knowing that I was on a full ride there, and I was swimming slower than I have in, at that point, 4 years. So who's going to want to take me? And that was a tough conversation to have with my dad, because it was kind of mine and his deal, as far as getting a full ride to college, and knowing that my family did not have money set aside for me for school. So that was a ton of pressure, and my mom was already on board. She knew kind of what was going on, but it was hard for my dad to really get that concept as well. And like, the coaches there just could not, it was always on me. It was my problem. I had to deal with it. It was something I was doing wrong, and they couldn't get through their heads that a college guy could be dealing with an eating disorder. And that's now something I fight for, every chance I get, is to just raise that kind of awareness. But
did you finish the season? Did you stay on campus through the second semester? When did you actually finally come home and get that?
So I did. I went to the first chance meet, and at that time, only two people weren't going to the conference meet, and I was one of those two. And then they went to NCAAs, and I remember they were coming back that Sunday, and I texted the coach and was like, hey, we need to talk about something. But he like was going on a recruiting trip, so we weren't going to be able to meet until Wednesday. And I remember freaking out, going, well, okay, if I'm already planning on transferring, I don't want to go to practice for the next 3 days knowing this, and like having that weird dynamic. And he asked me what I wanted to meet about, and so I told him, and then he called me, and we talked about it on the phone, and he was like all for it. Not in a bad way, but he was like, yeah, like, if this isn't working for you, like, I will give you the support you need to go somewhere else. I mean, essentially, he said the only other place I couldn't go was Kentucky, and I wasn't going to fight that because I didn't want to go to Kentucky anyway. So that second time around, I looked at Michigan State, Michigan, 2 schools close to home, and then Purdue, pretty close to home, all great engineering schools. Because also, when I tell people I'm in engineering at Louisville and they go, oh, Louisville has an engineering department, it's not the same as when you tell someone you're engineering at Michigan and they give you a pat on the back because they know how hard it is, or they've heard of how hard it is. So that played a role in it too. And Michigan was my last trip out of the 3 that spring. And I was taking trips while I was still at school at Louisville. Had to get an Uber to the airport and go get on a plane and do all this stuff. And they were just day long. They weren't your normal recruiting trips. But I remember coming on my trip here, sitting in my meeting with Mike, and him saying, because I was so worried that I wasn't going to be even looked at because of how slow I was swimming. He was like, I don't care about swimming. He was like, I want to get you healthy. And I was like, really taken aback by that at first. It's like, how can you not care about swimming? Like, actually, the first thing he said was, why didn't you want to go here in the first place? And I kind of had to avoid that question a little bit. But he's like, I want to get you healthy. He's like, I don't care about swimming. We'll figure that out when time comes. But I'm going to get you healthy, and I'm going to make a promise to you and your mom and your family that it's going to happen. And I was like, okay, I guess this is where I'm coming. And that was like seriously the decision maker, the fact that I could focus on getting healthy. And
Spence, did you ever step away from swimming at all to work on yourself, or did you try to continue swimming while you were trying to figure out the steps you needed to take?
yeah, I was swimming this whole time. That was a big part of it for me, a big part of what this eating disorder was. I couldn't not swim. If I didn't swim, I would eat less, I would restrict more, I would have even more anxiety about everything I was doing. So I couldn't not swim. And that was very, very unhealthy. But until I had gotten to Michigan, I didn't know that like that was part of the problem. So like that whole summer now, we're trying to figure this all out like before I get to Michigan. And now at this point, Jim was super apologetic because, and I mean, and I'm not going to say, oh yeah, it's anybody's fault, because nobody really knew what was going on, because that's the one thing is, and that's what's so hard for people. Nobody knew what was going on because I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't explain this to somebody because I couldn't explain it to myself. And that's one thing that's super hard for people on the outside looking in, someone dealing with mental health issues, is that like, they're like, okay, well, do this, or just do this, or just think this way, or just eat this, you know. It's just not, you just can't do that. And it's so impossible to explain to somebody that there's this, even though I knew what was right and what I had to do. And in fact, like I have had nutritionists at Louisville and Michigan both tell me, they're like, you're super smart. Like I bet I could give you a person and say like, we want to develop some like lifestyle for them, and you could do it. You would know exactly what to do for them, but you could never do it for yourself. And that was true. I couldn't. Like I could not make any decision for myself because there was something in the back of my head telling me, even if I knew what to reach for, knew how much I needed to eat, it was saying, no, that's not it. Nope, you're not going to do that. And just trying to explain that to somebody was one of the hardest things I've had to do in that process. So then now I'm at Michigan that fall, and tried to start swimming, tried to start going, and again, freezing in the water, couldn't make it through a practice. But at this point, I was so deep into this hole that I was trying to like now work myself out of it, not knowing the kind of help I really needed. And so I wasn't really talking to the people that I needed to because of the mistrust I had at Louisville. So I just wasn't talking to anybody. Started swimming in the diving well because it was warmer by myself while everyone was practicing in the main pool. And so that was kind of like a little like just plateau that I'd reached. Like I was able to do that, but clearly that's just not enough and not right. And it was starting to come time to the first meet, and I remember Josh coming over and talking to me while I was in the well. He's like, so like, what are we thinking? And I was like, I don't think I'm ready to swim at this meet. And he's like, nope, that's okay, we'll just take it meet by meet. And that seems from the outside like kind of like a blessing, like, oh, we'll just take it day by day, we'll figure this out. But to me, that was eating me away because I just kept thinking, okay, what's next? Like if next week he says, no, we need you to swim, and I'm like, but no, I'm not ready, what do I do? So him and I had the conversation about redshirting that year, and that took such a huge weight off my shoulders because there was no expectations of me now for swimming, and I could do everything that I needed to do to get healthy. So I was meeting with a doctor, nutritionist, and 2 psychologists about all this, and doctor actually that first week, this was I think like October of that year, pulled me out of the water. She said, you're going to be out of the water for a week until we can put some weight on. And I spent that whole week, I called my mom every single day while I would have been practicing. I spent that time at the pool because I couldn't be away from the pool. So I was just sitting in the team room, like watching people practice, but I wasn't able to swim. I was going absolutely insane not being able to swim. And I still couldn't like connect that, no, I need to not swim in order to get healthy. And the only reason, actually, the part of the main reason she pulled me out of the water was because like I've just naturally had a low heart rate, but that appointment that I had on the Tuesday before she took me out, my heart rate was sitting at 30 beats per minute, which is just ridiculously low. So and essentially what she told me was, because I was like, but I'm able to swim. Like, I have the energy to make it through practice. Yes, I get too cold from the main pool, so I'm going to the well. But I was like, but I'm able to swim. She was like, yeah, so that means it's crazy what your mind will do for you and what the body is capable of. But swimming meant so much to me at this point that my mind and my body was converting any energy that I might have had into letting me swim just so I could be happy and make it through the day, is essentially how we kind of described it. And it was eating the rest of my body to the point where it was taking energy away from my heart just to be able to swim, just to make me happy. And so she was like, I need to save you from yourself. You need to be out of the water. So the first week was tough. Got back in the next week, the weight went off immediately. So she had to pull me out again. Then that second week, the next time I got pulled out, I definitely had a different mindset about it. I was able to be more positive and knowing, okay, like I want to put on weight, like this is what I want to do. But that whole year was extremely rough. I never really consistently gained weight. I was still battling with this eating disorder. Went to see a new psychologist, and that's where some real progress was made with her. And we kind of talked about we had to find some reason that this started to happen. And so we go back to this confidence thing. And throughout high school, I didn't have a lot of friends. I had a couple friends, and I was perfectly fine with that. And so, I mean, right now I weigh 160 pounds, and I'm healthy and happy and swimming relatively well considering the 4-month break we had. My freshman year of high school, I was 2 inches shorter than I am now and 200 pounds. And like we had talked, like, and that's kind of like why I didn't want to mention why I was getting that much faster throughout those years. But then by my senior year and right before juniors, I was 150 pounds. But at that point, I was strong and swimming well and eating enough. So, I mean, I'd always been called like bad or whatever growing up, but I never put anything on it because I was still an elite swimmer. Like I was like, I'm doing things that none of you could even dream of doing for 2-3 hours a day in the water. Like, I don't care what you call me. And I had such this insane level of confidence that now it came to the point where I was not with my best friend. I was by myself, and I was starting to feel all this pressure that I was putting on myself, but that most people experience in high school, right? This whole, oh, it's just a high school phase, like you get bullied, you figure it out, things like that. But I didn't go through that in high school because I just brushed it off, did not care about it. But then now all of a sudden I'm caring about it, and none of my friends are there. I didn't have anybody to talk to, no support. So that's when it really started to eat me. And that's kind of like how we figured out what was really the underlying cause of this. But now it's how do I get out of that? And it surprisingly, or not really surprisingly, but ironically, comes back to swimming. Like I was to the point, like was so unhealthy to the point where I was dreading swimming. Like I didn't want to go to practice because I knew if I worked too hard at any given point, I wouldn't have enough energy to do anything else throughout the day, throughout practice, whatever it was. I was dreading practice, and I hated that. I hated hating the sport that I loved my whole life. And it was weird to address that. Like, wait, like I'm actually kind of hating swimming right now. And I hate myself for saying that I hate swimming, because I can't. Like, this is the thing I love to do. I've loved it my whole life. And so realizing that, that started to be what helped me get out of it. It's like, now everything I do is for swimming, essentially. I'm going to eat this, or when I'm encountered with a difficult decision, it's like, what's going to help my swimming? Because being in the water is something I love, but if I hate it, then I can't love it. So it's like, what can I do to help me love it again? And once I had kind of made that realization, I sent a message to the team in our group chat and told them, like, I mean, they had seen me out of the water quite a few times, but no one really knew what was going on. And so I told them, I was just, here's the thing, I have an eating disorder. I don't know how long this is going to take me to get through. Don't know what I'm going to have to do to get through, but I need everybody. And I know I've been shutting myself off from everybody, but now it has to be different. And from that point forward, like I said, I'm super open to talking about it, because that was the only thing that got me out of it, or got me to this point at least, was talking about it with any person that will listen, and explaining to them what I was going through. Because every time I explain what I was going through, I'm able to like look back on it and go, okay, this is how I prevent it, or this is what I could have done, and now I know that moving forward, and this is what I'm going to do. And it was still really hard through that whole summer. It was rough. And then last year, I thought I was in a good spot going in, and I was at first. And then come end of September, early October, things started to go a little rough again. I was getting cold, wasn't quite eating enough. And I remember it was a Monday threshold. I got out of the water in the middle of warm-up, went over to talk to Josh, and I said, here's the thing, I've never done this before. This is not the kind of person I am, but I'm still, and at this point, I had made enough progress with my mental health and and psychologist I was meeting with, that I was able to recognize this and make the decision. But I told him, I was like, I need to do less. And that was crazy for me, because I've always been the kind of person, more. I want to do more. I need to do this. And I told him, I was like, I need to do less. I was like, I need to do less work. I need to put on weight. I need to do this for the sake of my swimming. And of course, he was totally on board with it. And I shouldn't have been shocked that he was, from all the other support that I've gotten from this team. And that's what we did. I was swimming half, or like 50% of afternoon practices, or like just going an hour or whatever, getting some work in. And I started to put on weight. I was swimming faster every week, essentially. There was a couple rough periods, like when we had to deal with this whole parasite situation and we were out of our pool, having to swim at some other pools, like at 7 to 9 p.m. and working with him. I was like, nope. So I went and swam with the girls, because I knew at like 7 to 9 I needed to eat, or else if I was swimming at that time, that was going to throw off my eating schedule. And everything was scheduled. This was how I was getting out of it. And we did that throughout almost the whole year. It was like through training trip, and things just went better and better and better every day, to the point where I was now able to, once I started adding practices back gradually, I was able to keep up with that. And then come taper, and I go a 4:18 in my 500, which was, that event completely shocked me, because I was training for the 2 fly, or at least thought I was training for the 2 fly. So that was wild. And then the 2 fly, and when I went and saw that I went a best time, I started, like, this was at the first chance meet. I was fighting for a spot on the Big Ten team. Even though I knew at the time I was like the second best tuner flyer potentially that we had, so I should have been a lock, but I wasn't. It was more just to get me a tapered meet for the first time in 4 years at that point. and it went a best time, and I just sank in the water, started crying, and was like, this is everything. And it was a half a second, or it was like a half a second drop, but that did not matter. I mean, I was under 144. It finally went a best time in my event. Like that, like the 200 fly has been like my baby growing up, and like that, like I at that point didn't even care about the 500, even though relatively was a better time. Like I got into 2 fly, and now I've just been, and I was ready to carry that momentum throughout this summer into this year, and then we hit the whole COVID break, and I started to struggle a little bit then too, because now we were out of the water, and like I said, swimming was a huge part of like me being healthy. It's like now I'm not able to swim. What am I going to do? So that was really tough. The first month of that was really hard, and to the point where like my mom like was checking in on me every day I was home, like make sure I was doing something, keep my mind off of the fact that I wasn't swimming. But Moss has a pool in his backyard, so I swam there, 12, I think it was like 12 yards across, like something to keep the feel of it. I was doing other things like work out, and then I made the decision. I was like, because I'm not swimming and not doing all this aerobic work that's going to kill any muscle I can grow, I'm going to try to lift super heavy and put on some weight that way. And just being able to say that out loud was totally new to me. And I thought that was awesome that I was able to say it. And I stepped on a scale for the first time in a while each week to make sure I was gaining weight. And it was fun. It was different. I was having fun doing it because I like lifting, and I've definitely come a long way from that point. And throughout that whole process, like I've not had to deal with, but I've worked with and dealt with friends and teammates that have been going through different struggles. And by any doctor or coach or parent, I've been told, they're like, please come, like talk to them, talk to this. Jim constantly is having me talk to the younger kids on the team that might be dealing with something or don't really know what they're dealing with. It's like, you're the only one that knows what goes through someone's head when they're going through something like this. Like they need, and so that's my new role. That's been my role now on this team, as a friend, as a brother to these guys. And I've taken that wholeheartedly. And so it's a long story, but I think it needs to be shared, because now, as much as it sucked and as much as it seems like all that time was wasted, as far as swimming is concerned, it wasn't at all. It's going to make me stronger in the future. I now have that to look back on, and it's something that's never going to go away, right? Like, mental health issues are something that everybody struggles with, and because I had such a big experience with it, it's never going to go away. It'll try to find ways to show back up, whether it's 5 years, 10 years from now. But I know what kind of support I need. I know that I need to talk to people. People need relationships and all this stuff to work through these things, and taking that and building off of that is only going to make things better in the long run, make me stronger. So yeah.